Hey everyone, welcome to Pinpointe Unfiltered. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Josh, and today we'll dive into something that affects literally every New Yorker that rents an apartment, the rental process.
Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation out there. I mean, we've seen people start their search way too early, way too late, get blindsided by application requirements, and also just throw money away at amenities that they never use.
And the worst part is that a lot of brokers don't actually tell you about these things, and they tell you the truth and are transparent about this process. They just want to hurry you through the deal, get your money, and move you along.
Exactly. So that's why today we're going to break down everything from when you should actually start looking. Spoiler, it's probably earlier than you think it is. But also to whether you should have that in unit washer and dryer if it's really worth, an extra 300 plus a month.
And the realness on the approval requirements, that whole 40 times the rent thing. We'll tell you what that really means and what you need and don't need to qualify.
Yeah, because we don't like to waste anybody's time. We'll also cover um, everything they need for the application process, what to look for in leases, and the actual moving costs that you should expect.
All the stuff that we wish someone would have told us, before we started this whole journey in the real estate business. Um, but what we try to tell all our clients.
Yeah. So let's jump right in with the timeline question. When should you actually start looking for a rental in the city, Josh?
My advice, if you are, what are we up coming up on? We're coming up on April 1. If I were looking to start my lease, let's say April 1, I would probably begin the search March 1. Maybe end like last week of February, but definitely like March 1 is like when you really should be actively outside looking at apartments in person.
Yeah, I agree with
That's like
that. I would say like 30 days in advance, 45 days at the absolute most. But there you're kind of like running into the problem because some landlords don't have their availability more than 30 days in advance. And also, many landlords don't want to have leases starting more than 30 days from now, right? So I don't know how many times you've experienced this, Josh, but this I've even just experienced this last week where a landlord's like, well, we could push 3 weeks from the date of the application to start the lease. So
and
that's a
that is
lot.
very
That
generous. That's
Yeah,
very
they're not,
generous.
most of them are like it needs to start like
10 days,
immediately.
14, max 14.
Yeah, yeah. So it you definitely don't want to start looking too early. But then you don't want to start looking too late. Like 2 weeks before your move date is you're pushing it, right? Like I think one of the questions that I get asked all the time is how long does it take to find an apartment? And I always say it depends on the renter, right? Because I could show you everything that there is in your budget and your location and all of these things in one day. It's up to you to decide, you know, which one you're going to do, right? So most people can't make a decision in a day. 2 weeks,
So
you're
this is
putting
cutting it
pressure.
close
You're
because,
putting pressure.
you know, things can happen. Like, hey, the leasing director's sick this week and, or went on vacation, got married, whatever. I've experienced it all where I've had very quick approval processes and I've had approval processes that take, a couple weeks. It's, it's
I
not,
mean,
it's not
what happens if
common.
you're applying with roommates, right? One roommate has all their shit together, the other doesn't, and needs their parents to submit shit. Like
And
you
there's
get,
one roommate that wasn't on the tour, wants to pay the least and wants the most.
yeah,
That's the one that's going to call. That's the roommate, for example, that I give to clients. That's going to cost you your apartment. I'm like, listen,
yeah,
I want to be friends with everyone, but in the New York City real estate business, you got to cut the dead weight at some
yes, you
point.
do. Yeah,
At some point, you got to cut the dead weight because if you don't, then you're gonna one be living in a crappy apartment or in a bad neighborhood.
yeah,
You choose.
yeah. So basically, start 30 days before your move date. The next thing that you do in the search, right? Now you know when you start to look. Now you have to determine what you're actually looking for. So
1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, studios, five
your budget,
bedrooms,
right?
budgets. Oh,
Your budget, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms if you have roommates or children, what neighborhood. When you're considering the neighborhood, you need to consider, your commute to
bodega stores. Where are you gonna get your chopped
groceries,
cheese?
if there's no laundry, where you're going to do your laundry. Um, and that brings us to the other part of determining your search criteria is amenities, right? So you have your budget, your neighborhood, your amenities. Those are what you need to figure out to determine where you're going to actually look and what you're looking for, because you can adjust neighborhood and amenities, but most people can't adjust their budget.
Yeah, usually the budget's the budget. I give it $200 to $300, possibly five. If
That's
it's
stretching
like
it.
I
Most people can't stretch that.
love, I love this apartment.
Yeah.
Um, but what I mean is what they tell us.
Hmm.
Hey, I'm looking for a 1 bedroom for $3,000. I'm like, okay, so maybe I'll like search up to 3,500
Hmm.
because if I'm gonna put some work in, I might as well I'm like shed a bigger net than just try to find the 3 1 bedroom apartments at 3,000 on this one block, and
Hmm.
then get mad that I find out 2 weeks later that the person rented with someone else a $3,500 apartment that I would have shown them.
Yep. But they said specifically, don't show me anything above 3,000, and you didn't, and then you got screwed on losing that deal.
Yeah,
And you're
which
like, dude,
is
if you would have just told me, I would have shown you that. Like, not a problem.
which is why I don't know. I think the whole taking videos of apartments that we like advertise and it being our video and not another person's, not like
Hmm.
somebody else's YouTube or anything like that, is important for me, because it shows a level of transparency, whereas like, no, we're showing you the apartment that you clicked on.
Hmm.
Now here is a smorgasbord of
Hmm.
other apartments that we could like take you that possibly fit what you're telling me you're looking for.
Yeah. I do that
Excuse
all
me.
the time. I'm always like, all right, you gave me these specific parameters. And I opened up in my search the parameters a bit. I went $500 over budget. I went within the budget and in a slightly different neighborhood to kind of show people. And so when I go on these tours, I'm like, okay, this is exactly what you wanted, right? This is exactly what you wanted, but a little bit more expensive. So like has a little bit more bells and whistles. And here is a more budget friendly, but in a different neighborhood than you were thinking, right? So to give people that full spectrum so they can understand what is really out there and not just what they have decided for themselves, what they think
Yeah.
is best for them. Because it's not that we know what's best, it's that we do this every day.
Oh,
So
no, no,
when
no.
someone has a
I know what's
specific,
best, people. I
whatever,
know what's
I was
best.
trying not to be a dick, but
Listen to me and you'll like save a
for
lot of
sure,
stress and
for
heartache. No, I'm
sure,
just joking.
I agree. We know what's out there. We're there. This is what we do every day. So if you give us like what you're looking for, we'll actually show it to you, and it won't be what you had in your head most of the times. Speaking of, I'm gonna go straight into one of the most common amenities that people love is washer and dryer unit. Um, it's great, right? You don't have to go, if your building has laundry, you don't have to go to your basement. If you don't have laundry, you don't have to go to the laundromat. Josh, I literally like read last night an article about a study that came out um, earlier this week, I think, that showed that washer and dryer unit costs an additional 12% in rent. If your apartment,
Yeah.
let's say, is $3,000, okay,
So
that
a bit over
12% is
$300.
360 a month. So you're paying 33.60 now for an apartment just to have washer and dryer unit. And if you consider how much it costs to do laundry in a laundromat, a load is not going to cost more than $10 like per load. Like that
And
would
if you're
be
like
very
me,
expensive.
if you have laundry in unit, you tend to like do laundry a lot because I was like, oh, it's here. I might as well get some laundry done.
Yeah.
Your electric bill is gonna go up.
Yes,
You're like,
because
whoa, why is my Con Ed so high?
the
Oh,
landlord
because
is
you've been
not
running
paying
the
that. Yeah.
washer and dryer every
Yeah.
day.
Yep. And but like if you didn't, right? Like if you didn't have laundry in unit, you would be more selective of when you do laundry,
Yeah.
right? But if you were thinking at $360, right, for a $3,000 apartment, $360 to just have washer and dryer in unit, you would have to do a load at a laundromat every single day to come close to hitting that amount of three
And
hundred
that's
sixty
a
dollars.
month.
And why do people think automatically that they have to go? Yes, it is a month. That they have to go do the laundry themselves. This is New York. Everything delivers. You can do pickup, drop
Yeah.
off at $2 a pound. At $2 a pound,
There's
let's
an
say you
app
do
for that.
20.
There's an app for everything
You don't
nowadays.
even have to do an app. You can just go to a laundromat that's on your block and be like, hey, do you guys do pickup, drop off, wash and fold? Yes, great. They'll come and pick it up, and if you're on the fifth floor walk up, they will come and get it. And that actually ends up being cheaper than the cost of washer dryer unit, right? So
Yeah.
really think about it. Like it doesn't really make sense that you're giving the landlord this extra cash because washer dryer costs them what, 2,500 bucks one time. At $360 a month in 7 months, they've made their money back. Now you're just putting money in their pocket for what? And also, Josh, you can attest to this because you actually had one combo washer dryer.
The worst.
Absolutely. You
Convenient,
just
yes.
take your money, light it on fire. Boom.
Convenient, yes. Was I happy with the results? Not absolutely. You can't really put the bigger, like I'm a big person. So my jeans are like your body, like the length of your body. So I could put like two jeans in the washer. Um, because they wouldn't like wash properly. It'll take forever to dry.
No, they don't
I'm
dry.
talking about loads that would like, oh, you put the load in and it tells you how long it's going to be. And it's like, yes, 5 hours, 6 hours later. I'm like, wow, that's way too long. When if I went to the laundromat, literally an hour and a half to do laundry.
Yeah, yeah, and to do a shit ton of laundry,
Yeah.
more than one load.
If you get,
And
if
even
you
if you
get
did just one
multiple
load,
like
but
machines, like if you
but
get
even if
multiple
you did
machines,
one
cool.
load, those machines are larger than the tiny combo unit. And the reason that the combo unit takes so long is because it's a washing machine. So it's humid and wet in there. It's not going to dry properly, and it's going to take a really long time, and it's still not going to be dry by the time it's finished.
Yeah, it was nice to have the convenience,
Hmm.
but you're still going to end up wanting to go to the laundromat for something.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have washer dryer here, and we have kids, so it makes sense. But even us, we don't do laundry every day. Like our kids aren't babies, so we don't need to do it every day. Um, we do laundry probably every 3 days. But again, like I would
So
so it's a lot.
laundry.
It's a lot, bro. Bro, we have so much fucking
Oh my
laundry.
god!
We have so much
Say,
fucking
I
laundry.
thought you were gonna say like every week. I'm like, oh, that's not that bad.
No,
Every
when I was
three
by myself,
days.
when I lived by myself, I did laundry every week. Every 3 days we do laundry. Anyways, it's not, not about how often we do.
Fuck.
Moral story, think twice before you
Moral of the story is move to
don't get
Jersey,
kids. No, no, no.
have
Moral,
children.
moral of the story is think twice before you want to throw away money on washer dryer. Um, the other part of amenities is like luxury buildings, right? Everyone wants a doorman. Great, you're going to pay extra for that. If you feel like you need that extra security, okay, I'm not going to fight you on that. I will say though, for luxury buildings that have like gyms and like lounges and public spaces, um, always be aware that the rent is not the final cost. There's an amenity fee, and they will tell you it's optional. You don't have to pay for that amenity fee because it's a monthly fee. Most of the time, it's a monthly fee, and they'll say it's optional, but then you can't use any of their amenities. So you can't use like if there's a rooftop, you won't be able to access the rooftop. If there's a gym, you won't be able to use the gym. So definitely take that into consideration when you're looking at luxury buildings, that the rent is just the base price and then there's all the extras. Now, I will say the amenity fees are usually cheaper than a gym membership.
Depending on the building, yeah.
I think one of the most expensive amenity fees that I've seen so far is about $150 a month per person. If you go to like a Crunch gym, if that's like the level of gym, you're looking at about $150 a month. If you're looking at Equinox, that's like 300 plus per month. And some of these luxury buildings have gyms at that level. So definitely something to consider. But just remember, it's not an upfront fee. You have to ask about it, or they'll just throw it at you when you're signing the lease.
It starts to add up. It definitely starts to add up.
But yeah,
Some of
pet
the
fees and pet rent.
pet deposits, pet rent, your gym fee, and like Rachel said, you could easily find a similar type gym. Um,
Mhm.
for the most part, not like the building gyms are, they're good. Again, convenient. They're not blow your mind away. There are some buildings that have like, oh wow,
Mhm.
this is like a nice, really upscale gym. Um, but even some of those buildings, I've like seen some buildings have like really cheap amenity fees, like $50 a month for like a really good gym. You know, you have to do the work, and this is where like having a broker helps because we see a lot of the buildings. So I know it's like, oh, you want this type of gym at this price. Okay, I know what kind of building. I know which buildings we should probably show you.
Mhm.
Uh, I guess I'm always going to go back to reasons why you should like always want to hire us
Totally.
because of
Because we're
small
the
little
best.
like things
We're the
like
best.
this. Like besides us being the best, obviously.
So, Josh, what is the typical approval requirements to get approved to rent an apartment in New York?
Kind of, well, and I say kind of standard is because every landlord is a little different.
Hmm.
Could say I want 45 times the rent. I want 2 years work experience, whatever. But the general all across the board in New York City is 40 times the rent, your monthly rent, and you have a good credit score, what we consider good credit scores above 700, 720 really. But if you're
Hmm.
above 700, that's considered good. And work some type of work history, but again, every landlord is a little different.
Hmm.
Where just having an employment letter like as a new hire is sufficient, and there are other landlords that are like, nope, you just got that job, we need you to have a guarantor or like better credit. I don't know.
Yeah, there's also some landlords that won't care if you don't have a good credit score, especially if you're moving to the US from another country and you just don't have credit. As long as you make like 40 times, not most, some landlords will accept that. And when we say
Yeah,
40
I just
times,
had a
it's
client recently that they waived the guarantor fee. They didn't have to use guarantors
love that.
because they met the financial requirements but didn't have a credit history just yet. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And some landlords will be like, yeah, if you make 40 times, but also like you just moved here, so you have a new job. What about how much money do you have in the bank? Right. So it some landlords will bend the rules, their own rules a little bit. But as an example of the 40 times, right? If you are looking at a $3,000 a month apartment, which we were talking about earlier, which again, don't quote us that you're going to get a $3,000 apartment. Don't want to give out false hope, especially as we head
There's
into summer.
some.
Yeah, there are. But $3,000, you need to make, what is that, 120,000 a year? And it can be combined, right? So if you have a roommate and you're sharing a studio at $3,000 a month, then you both have to combine to make 120. It doesn't have to be a 50-50 split. It just has to be a total of 120. But while there are some landlords that will be flexible on the rules, there are some that are extremely, extremely rigid. So if you don't qualify with 40 times on your credit score um, and a job, you can apply with a personal guarantor. So somebody that's basically like co-signing the lease for you, but their requirements are doubled. So the guarantor will have to make like 80 times. Most people don't know people that make that much money.
And the reason the 80 times came about, and I want people to understand this. Back, way before the 40 times the rent was a thing. Like I've been here, and back in 2007, I can believe with the crash, we had that huge 2008. All right, so 2007, 2008, we had that crash, and New York hurt really, really badly because the first thing that happens when people like stop working, the most expensive bill that you have is your rent. People stop paying rent, and landlords are not all cash rich, where they have all this cash sitting like in a safe waiting for them to just spend it. Um, they usually get these buildings based off their credit
Loans.
and
They get loans.
loans, and it becomes a domino effect when seven people can't pay their rent in a building. Now the landlord's like, well, I can't really meet the maintenance and what I need for the
Yeah, the
mortgage.
overhead.
I can't make overhead, so you know what? I need to pay for my actual living, mortgage. I'd rather pay that than pay this. This is where the crash starts happening. This is where you have all these foreclosures. After that, we're like, hey, New York state law, whomever, those powers that be, said, you know what, we need to tighten this up because we can't have this type of fall ever again. And then they came up with these requirements, and these requirements are outlandish because the average person is not making 120,000 out of college. And that's what usually people start their New York experience. It's like either you come to college here or you get your first job right out of college here.
Hmm.
And your first job right out of college, for the most part, is not a 22-year-old making $120,000. And like Rachel said, 80 times is because, well, we need to make sure that whomever is going to co sign this, they can pay their rent as well.
Yeah, they could pay their own bills plus this person's new bills.
Yeah. So that 80 times number came about from that time. Um, it was like, it's very difficult when you have to tell people, hey, you don't make enough money. That sucks.
Yeah, it does suck. It does suck. But then now that's why there's another thing called third party guarantors. So third party guarantors are basically like an insurance for the landlord that the renter pays. Um, they basically cover any expenses for the landlord if the renter stops paying rent or they have to be evicted. So because it takes so long to evict somebody in New York City, it takes a landlord over a year to recoup that money, or they sometimes might not ever get that money back. So, using a third party guarantor, they can get that money directly from that guarantor company, and then the guarantor company will collect from the renter at a later date. So that so some landlords, a lot more now, I would say, are willing to use a third party guarantor, right? Because they it's a little bit more of an insurance for them, right? That's another fee that you have to consider if that's what you're going to need. But not all landlords will accept a third party guarantor. And there's three large third party guarantor companies. And again, not all landlords will take all three. Some of them work with only one, some of them work with a couple. Um, and so that's another reason why you should use a broker. We know pretty much which landlords take which ones. And if you're, um, you know, applying to a bunch of different places, it's best to know upfront which place is going to take you. And then there are some landlords, I won't name names, that won't take a guarantor at all, right? Because their idea is like, hey, if 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 this renter can't afford to pay rent, why am I going to take them just so that I can have the hassle of having to collect that money from somebody else? I'd rather not deal with it. So again, we know which landlords those are for the most part. Not every single landlord, but for the most part, we kind of have this idea, or rather understanding of where you would need to go based on how you would be approved. Josh, anything to add on that?
The guarantors. No, I think that like you covered that really well. I guess one thing I could add, another reason the third party guarantors were created. New York is huge with the international relocation. For student, for work, it's huge. And before these third party guarantors, when we had an international client, a lot of landlords were charging 12-month security up front,
Hmm.
and that's security, not your advance rent.
You're not paying rent, yeah.
So it's like
You're
you
just
still
giving them money
paid,
to hold.
you
Hmm.
just gave them a year's worth of rent, and every single month you're going to pay your rent, and then at the end of it, they're going to give you a nice big check of for your security deposit. Um, that's how like people would have to secure certain apartments.
I did. The apartment that you got for me when we met, when you were my broker,
What was it, 3 month security?
it was 4 months of security. And the original deal was like they were going to hold the 4 months the entire time that I lived there. And I fought back and I was like, listen, if I renew my lease, you're going to give me back 2 months. And then if I renew my lease again, you're going to give me back 1 month. And then you're just going to have 1 month.
Yeah,
Because they wanted to just hold the 4 months indefinitely. And I was like, no,
and it's just going to sit in a bank account for them and like
that they're collecting interest,
gain
which
interest.
technically, if they collect interest on, they owe that to you. But I've never, in my life of living in New York for the past 8 years, I've never had any landlord pay me the interest that they're collecting. Um, so I wouldn't bank on that. Um,
So,
but yeah,
so
so
yeah, with
to get rid
that
of that,
was I thought like, yeah, I'm having to pay another fee like is not ideal, but it levels a playing field where only a
hmm
certain person or a certain type of person could afford, like actually afford to come and move to New York if they didn't have a guarantor, or you were going to live in some sketchy places.
yeah, yeah,
Not
and
saying
that
that a person can't come and like, hey, get rent a room someplace like, you know, Craigslist it. What we're talking about are like the standard general kind of requirements that it takes to get an apartment. Now there are other ways to get apartments, Housing Connect, affordable housing lotteries, things like that, that we'll like talk about at some other point in a
hmm
different podcast. But yeah, those were the standard,
requirements.
practices and of this process.
Yeah, and that the asking multiple months of security or rent up front changed with the law in 2019. So now, if a landlord asks you to pay more than a month's security or more than 1 month up front of rent, that is
That's
legal.
a red flag.
Yep, don't rent there, and don't don't work with a broker if they tell you that's okay. So next up, now we know what you need to get approved. Now the application. So, what are the general required documents that you need for your application, knowing that not every landlord is the same, but a general idea of what they ask for?
Generally, you're definitely going to need your photo ID, passport, something like that. You're going to need your most current bank statement, possibly up to 2 to 3 sometimes, depending on the landlord. But you're definitely going to need bank statements. You're going to need your latest tax return, the 1040 tax return. Usually, just the first 2 pages is fine. Um, what did I say? Bank statements, tax return, ID, employment letter if you're a new hire, your contract offer. Um, if you're not a new hire, pay stubs are great, but definitely some type of employment verification, whether it be employment letter or pay stubs. Pay stubs can also, if you don't get pay stubs and you get like a direct deposit, your bank statement shows your
Hmm.
direct deposit every week. Those are things that could be highlighted easily and act as, kind of pay stubs. What else? What else? What am I forgetting?
ID, bank statements, employment, taxes. That's it.
That's about it.
Some
Sometimes
someone will ask for like a landlord reference letter, but that's very, very
that's
few and far between.
not many, but some ask for, your social, like account, like
Yeah,
a
copy of social
photocopy
media.
of it
Yeah.
or something. I've had weird like, yeah, we also want like a headshot. Tell them to take a
I've seen
selfie. I'm like, all
that.
right, like sure, like I get it. They want to like have a face with your file, which I appreciate. That's
I think one landlord told me it was because they wanted to make sure that the super was giving the keys to the right person,
which I also
which I
appreciate
get,
as
which I
well.
get.
So yeah, that if you have pets, if you have pets, your emotional support certificate, if they're emotionally supportive,
It's
they
not
all
technically
are,
a, it's not a certificate. It's a letter from your
or a
mental
letter
health
from your
professional.
doctor, whatever it is, some type of paperwork about your pet being an emotional support animal,
We'll
would
help
be helpful.
waive those fees. We'll waive the pet fees.
And
Okay,
I
so
think that,
that's it for the documents.
yeah, that's
So
it
now we
for
can get into the
documents.
fun part, the costs, all the fees that you have to pay for. So you have another thing that was changed in 2019 with the law was that all application fees for rental buildings are $20 per applicant. That's the max. They cannot charge more than that. Um, so you have $20 per applicant, which means if you are applying by yourself, it's $20. If you are applying with a roommate, it's $20 per person. If you're applying with a personal guarantor, it's $20 for those guarantors, each of those. And that is a non-refundable fee. You give them that money. The reason it's $20 is it's supposed to cover the cost of the credit check that the landlords run on you. Now, I'm very curious to know when credit check fees go up, if the application fee is going to go up, but knowing New York City Council, that probably won't. Uh,
Then when
City
we
Council is going to be
charge
like, you're
more,
going to have to eat that cost. Yeah,
people are gonna want to
it's going
chew
to
my
add.
head off about
It's going to
like,
be added to the rent watch.
why is it $22? I'm like,
Yeah. Um. So you have that cost to apply. Um. What other costs do you have to apply? Well, the other thing that some people ask for is a good faith deposit. Now, let's be very clear here. Under New York law, a broker is barred from asking for a good faith deposit. It is illegal if a broker asks for it. It is not illegal for a landlord to ask for a good faith deposit. And you have to understand that sometimes a broker is hired by a landlord, and so therefore they're asking for it, but it's not the broker that's asking for the good faith deposit, it is the landlord. So if a broker asks you for a good faith deposit, you need to be very clear when you follow up with them and be like, are you asking for it, or is the landlord asking for it? If the broker's asking for it and they say that it's them asking for it and not the landlord, red flag, run away. If it's the
yeah,
landlord, then there's not much you can do about it. And the good faith deposit can be, a couple $100s to up to 1 month's rent. Um, and it is usually refundable if you do not get approved for the apartment. If you do get approved for the apartment, then that deposit becomes either your first month's rent or your security deposit.
yep, it gets rolled into your move-in cost, as
Yes.
we say.
If and one thing I want to touch on really quickly is the obligation when you're applying. So some landlords will let you apply with no obligation, meaning if you get approved, they are not going to require you to sign a lease. Those are, in my experience, and Josh, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So non-obligation landlords are usually like
Excuse
giant
me.
corporations, right? Because they're like, we don't care, we'll just take your $20 and we'll hold it for you until you decide that you don't want to sign a lease. Smaller landlords really can't afford to drag out this leasing process. So they will ask for a good faith deposit and then they will hold you to it. So if you get approved, they will oblige you to sign a lease. And if you don't, they could not refund you that deposit. So something that again you should always ask when you're before you apply is if there is an obligation. to sign a lease. Um, if you're working directly with a landlord, they will have that information. If you're working with a broker, they should have that information. And again, one of the differences working with us is we usually tell you upfront before you look at before you look to apply. We will tell you, hey, if you're thinking about applying to this apartment, this landlord has these obligations. Um, and Josh, for me, that's another reason why we suggest not to apply more than one at a time. But maybe you could speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I get there's probably going to be 4 or 5 that happened over the summer where someone on the weekend is going to tell me, hey, I really love this apartment, but I applied to this other apartment on Friday and I haven't heard anything back yet.
Try what do they expect?
And I'm like, well, okay, well, let's give it a minute before, you go out and look at apartments and like fall in love and get a broker to like send you applications, like do all this other stuff. Um, you don't want to get stuck with 2 apartments because you don't at one point you don't want to lose a deposit if you put a deposit up. Save as much money as you possibly can. Let the process like once you found the apartment and then you applied to the apartment, just let the process like carry out. Now I get it. There are circumstances where they've been waiting a week and a half for an approval, which is very rare. It's very, very rare that happens. And I understand someone looking at that point because you're like, well, I need to find a place to live. I 100% understand that. But other than that situation, uh, most mostly the application process takes for most landlords about 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Business days.
Business
Business
days, yes.
days.
Now,
They
if
don't
you
work on the
give
weekend.
you hand in an application on a Friday evening, they're probably not going to see that until Monday. You're probably not going to get an approval until maybe Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
That's normal.
Mm-hmm. But
If
also,
come next Friday you don't hear anything, that's when I would start inquiring, like, hey, what's going on? Should I start like looking again? That's a little bit more understandable. But if you had somebody an application in on like Thursday evening and it's Saturday and you haven't heard anything, please don't go out and look at a ton of apartments and try to apply to another one. You're just not doing yourself any justice.
no, you're not doing yourself any favors and you're wasting your own time. And you're wasting the broker's time and the landlord's time if they're showing you those apartments. Um, One thing that I would add to that though is if you submit your application, make sure that it's a completed application, right? Just because
Yeah,
you submitted an application and you paid the $20, great. Did you submit all the required documentation that that landlord requires? Because if not, you don't have a completed application and now you're just wasting your own time, everybody's time, right? So an application is not considered by a landlord until they have everything that they need. They're not going to look at it. They're not going to just be like, oh, well, they submitted the application part and they paid the application fee. So let me just take a look at that and run their credit before I have their documents. That's not happening. They're wasting their time. They're not doing that. So do yourself a favor. Make sure that you have all of your documents, the general ones that we discussed earlier,
and most
when
of those
you're looking at
documents are
apartments.
fairly easy to.
Yeah, but have them when you're looking, when you start looking for an apartment, have them ready so that you can just submit the application pretty quickly. Okay, so we've talked about application fee. We talked about the good faith deposit if a landlord requires it. Um, there's a pet deposit fee if you have a pet. Some
Some
buildings will
landlords,
ask
not all.
some, not all, so will ask for a pet deposit of like $500 or so. It depends. We talked about the application fee for rental buildings, and I specifically said rental buildings because co-ops and condos are not part of
Are
that law.
different.
Don't They're not considered a rental building, so they can make their application fees whatever they want.
I've
fifty
seen up
dollars
to
per
300.
person. Jesus Christ, per person or just per application?
No, per person.
Oh fuck, $300. So then you have co-ops and condos that charge exorbitant amount, and the app fees, right? And then they also have move in fees and move out fees. There's some that have like a refundable deposit to like reserve the elevator if there's an elevator or something like that, that you get back in full if you didn't damage anything. And then there's just a move in fee that is non refundable. That just goes to the co op or condo's pockets. So I always suggest if you're renting, stick to rental buildings and try to stay away from co-ops and condos, because also then you have the application process, which just because you applied, the owner of that apartment has accepted your application doesn't mean that the board is going to accept your application, and then you're going to have to submit a whole bunch more financial data, maybe have to sit for an interview, and then they can just decide nope for whatever reason. So save yourself the headache and the money and stick to rental buildings and not co-ops and condos. I think, oh, completed applications also count for guarantors, right? So it's not just you if
Yes,
you're applying with a guarantor.
your guarantor is your financial cloak, the person that is, the face of this operation. Uh, they want to see more of their paperwork than yours if you're using a guarantor. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah, at that point, they're like, I don't give a fuck about this person. I care about their parents or their uncle or whoever it is.
exactly the person that's going to be paying for this apartment. Um,
Yeah. Or
yeah,
paying
so make sure you
if you don't
have
pay.
completed applications in, especially, this time of year, starting to get busy. Competition is, there's still
Going to
not a
be
ton of
fierce.
apartments. There's still not a ton of apartments. So if
Even
it's
when there
something
is,
that
it's
you
still
like,
fierce. Yeah.
someone else likes it. If it's a good deal, yeah, there's a ton of people that saw that good deal. Social media is a real thing, and it's, things could get posted instantly and out to the masses very quickly. Um, and now with like apps, like even like Street Easy has an app, so I could from my phone walk into an apartment, love it, take a video, take pictures, make an ad in the apartment while I'm on the phone, and by the time I get like walk to the train station, 1,000, 2,000 people could have seen it easily
Hmm.
within a few minutes. So yeah,
Hmm.
remember that, people. Um, if it's nice and shiny and you like it, someone else likes it, be prepared, have all your stuff ready when you're actually going out to like look at apartments. Um, we said the first week of the month
The
before you're
month.
trying to move is like that's the time
That's
to
the
really
prime,
be out
yeah. The
there.
first week of the month before you move, for sure. Like if you're looking for, right now we're about to be April 1st, right? So let's say you're looking for an April 1st move, you should have started looking the first week of March.
Yep.
Because after that first week, then the availability is going to go down. And now, if you're looking today, we're recording this on March 23rd. If you're looking today for April 1st, you've got slim pickings. Slim pickings. All right. So I was just going to say, we talked about the application. Now let's talk about you getting approved. You got approved. Now you're going to sign a lease. What is something that you try to tell all your clients about leases in the city?
Um, they're pretty standard. Leases are standard in New York City. There's a lot of wording in the lease. Like if like, every client's different. Some people like to read word for word everything on that lease. And I understand that it's a, important document that you're about to sign, locking yourself into, paying rent someplace. I get wanting to like
But
find
these are like 80-page
payment.
leases.
Um, but the wording on these leases are meant so if the landlord has to take you to court, they actually have a fighting chance. In New York City, we are a renters city, so a
Yeah.
lot of the laws are geared
Tenant
to
laws. Yeah.
favor the renter rather than to, favor the landlord. Rachel said earlier, like, the eviction process takes a long time. Um,
Yeah.
and you
So
know what?
these,
We can't have everybody trying to like, beat their lease and not pay rent. New York will crumble. So this is why they made these leases like this. There's certain parts of the lease that are not, they don't really apply to like everyday life. where they're like, hey, you need to cover 80% of the floor with rugs. No, you don't. You don't need to do that at all.
No, but they need to have that there.
But they
Most of
put
these
it in
leases are
there.
like written by the state, right? They're just like state lease templates. So there's definitely things that are there. Isn't there one like you can't like wear heels or something?
It's just it's like ridiculous. Some of the things. For the most part, every landlord has, appliances in the apartment. It's
Mm-hmm.
not actually required for them to have, a dishwasher or a refrigerator or stove
Or a microwave.
or a microwave, but they do. There's levels to it. Some just have, the standard sink, stove, not dishwasher, refrigerator. Some get
Mini
a little,
mini. It's you can go
or
as basic as
or
a
even a
mini
mini
fridge and a
fridge.
hot plate. Mini fridge and a
Yeah,
hot plate.
I've seen that as well. So that's not an actual requirement, but it's, just in case if it's in the lease, if sometimes that pops up. I think the hardest leases or the most, lumber used leases is are
For
the rent
trees.
stabilized. The rent stabilized leases are, a little bit more jam packed because they have a lot of like numbers of what the rent could legally be, what it actually is. It's,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of information in that, and
And there's a lot of like verbiage that is specific.
rent stabilized leases are a lot more jam packed with information, pricing, what the legal rent is, what the rent that the tenant is paying is. Those numbers are going to be there to have. If there's any upgrades done to the apartment at any point, they have to itemize that and put a price on that and show you know any type of little increase that they have. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. Some landlords will allow you to pay your rent up to 10 days late. Standard really is about
Five.
5. Some say $50, fee for paying late rent. I've seen 10% put on a lease.
Yeah. I think you hit the biggest things there about like there's standard leases, there's things that are not going to apply to you. Um, One of the ones that always sticks out to me is every lease is going to say no pets are allowed. No pets. There's a no pet policy. Even if you have a pet and the landlord knows that you have a pet and they have allowed you to have that pet, the lease still is going to say no. Usually in those cases, you'll get like a pet addendum. Um, but again, even if you don't, it's okay. You put on the application that you have a pet. They are aware that you're going to have a pet, even if the lease says otherwise. A couple other things that are always part of leases and that make them extremely long are like lead paint riders. They always got to let you know if there's lead paint or was,
I wonder how long that's going to
especially
last.
especially since like it's from
The
since if the building was
70s.
78, right? 1978. If it was constructed after 1978, they stopped using lead paint. So they just say if this building was after 1978, there's no lead paint. And if it was built before 1978, is there any lead paint left in the building or something like that? It's crazy. I don't maybe till 2078. Who knows? Other
I'll
common
still be
forms
here.
are yeah. Other common forms are child related forms. Like if you have a child under like 10 or 5 or something like that, what do you want? Bars on the windows? Do you want like the stove, the knob covers, things like that? Just try not to get overwhelmed by the size of these leases because they are massive. Having a broker will definitely help you to understand what needs to be highlighted, what you need to be paying attention to, and what you can overlook. But yeah, I think that's it for the lease. So now what else is due at the lease besides signing is the move-in fees. So that is 1 month security, right? If you haven't already paid that in the good faith deposit, and your first month's rent. One thing I like to mention here is if you are moving in the middle of the month, the first month's rent is still being paid in full. Um, and usually, if let's say you move today on the 23rd, you sign a lease, you're paying the entire month up front. And then come April 1st is when you'll pay the prorated amount from the 23rd until the 31st. So just remember that part. And I think that's it about application, the search, the lease. And I think is just, why you should use a broker and how we can help you. Josh, what do you think?
Well, other than the obvious, like my boyish charm, extremely good looks. Um,
Absolutely.
I'm a ball to just like hang out with. I've been told many a times that that's the best experience they've ever had with any broker. No, I'm joking. No, reasons like you should use a broker. I know the terrain. I've seen it already. I've walked it 1,000 times. I know what to expect. I can prepare you with knowing what to expect throughout this process, which makes it less stressful. I think that's like the most stress that people have is not knowing um, what to expect. And that's why they get so stressed out about this process. Having a broker is about taking that stress off. I can get you to your space of renting faster than if you just did it on your own. And like,
Hmm.
yeah, maybe you get lucky. Like that does happen. There are times like you click that first ad and like, the apartment's available and it all just works out. Like awesome. Um, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. And you have to like see a couple apartments. And if you have to see a couple apartments, you might as well work with someone that you can communicate well with that could, again, get you to the renting, like to unpacking your bags as fast as possible.
Hmm.
That's the goal.
Yeah,
And doing it with flair is what we do.
for sure. The only thing I think I would add to that is, something that we already mentioned, right? We know where to look based on your needs. We would also like expand the search outside of your parameters to kind of give you a hodgepodge or like Josh said, a smorgasbord of different types of apartments. Um, we also know which landlords are going to approve you or not, or where you're more likely to be approved based on your situation, if you need a guarantor or not, or a third party guarantor. Um, because we've walked the block thousands of times, we know which buildings have the best management and which ones to avoid. And something that we've talked about in the last episode, we have relationships with landlords. So sometimes that helps bring your application to the top if there's a whole bunch of, people that have applied. So having relationships not just with brokers, but with brokers that have relationships with landlords is very helpful. Um,
Also, as like, you know, when I like reach out to other agents for, access to certain apartments or whatever, sometimes they just flat out tell me, like, hey, listen, I just got an application. Like,
mhm.
I don't want to waste your time. That stuff is important where if they were it's just a client, they're like, yeah, let's schedule the appointment. Cool.
Yeah, because they'll just try to flip them to another apartment that they have. They'll just try to keep the renter in their net or web, even though they
So
know that that apartment's already been rented or has an application on it.
it's not just the people that we do know, but the relationships that, the common courtesy that we show, like brokers show each other, is important as well.
Hmm.
Because sometimes brokers can be a bit jaded. I understand that. Like it happens. Um, and they're just like, oh, you're just another client, whatever. I don't care. I'm not going to treat you like a human yet because you're just another number on like my phone that I haven't like seen. Um, when they're dealing with other agents, because they know that we're going to run into each other again, treat them a little differently. Those things kind of can give you, the leg up, as they say
Hmm.
in the apartment finding process.
Yeah. So I think that's it, Josh. I think we
Yeah,
covered
so
everything.
I think we did. The rental process in New York is complicated, but it doesn't have to be stressful. Doesn't have to be mysterious. It could be a good time. You just have to call Josh, Pinpoint. Rach, how do you think we
Yeah.
did today?
I mean, I think we did good. I think we provided the people some really good information. Hopefully, you guys think so too. If not, let us know in the comments. Try to be kind.
Blame me.
Um, Yeah, and if there's things that we missed or there's questions that you guys have, please, definitely reach out to us. You can do it in the comments. You can find us on our website, pinpoint .nyc. Where else are we on? Instagram at Pinpoint Group, LinkedIn, just wherever you could find us. Reach out to us if you have any questions. We'd be happy to, answer any questions that you guys have. But just, remember, start the search, 30 days before, usually around the first of the month. Um, be realistic about your budget and your priorities. Understand the approval requirements before you fall in love with an apartment, please.
Yeah. And, ask the tough questions like what is absolutely needed? Do I need the washer and dryer? Do I need these amenities? Those things can cost you quite a bit and will maybe have to adjust your budget then knowing what amenities will be. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, working with a broker who actually, knows the land can make all the difference. It's not just about finding the right place, but it's also about getting your application prioritized and making sure that you are set up to succeed so that you guys get the best apartment that you guys actually want.
Yeah. And if you're ever thinking that, I can't afford this apartment or I can't make it because I don't meet whatever financial requirements, just remember there are options. Reach out to us. We could show you so we can give you some of those options. We could help you out. Let us know.
Yeah, so hopefully we shed a little bit of light on the process, and that's pretty much what we're all about. Transparency, telling you things that your broker never told you, and making sure that you guys are, the most prepared for the adventure that New York City renting is all about.
And we'll be dropping another episode next week, maybe, possibly,
Hopefully,
hopefully. Um,
or hopefully not, right? If we're so busy with clients, then maybe we don't have time to
Catch me on the
to
one
record
train.
another. Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
Peace.